I have I would say, an ulterior motive to participate in this session uh, and ask questions to colleagues who are much more learned than me. That's because I actually know very little about green hydrogen. And I think nothing better than a session like this with folks from different parts of the ecosystem who are directly involved in the green hydrogen business. Ask them questions. I'm going to learn a lot, and I'm sure the audience as well will be much more knowledgeable about this sort of emerging business at the end of the session. Let me just begin by making a few context setting remarks. The way I see it, and I work for a think tank and public policy research, our perspective tends to be slightly at a higher level. And the way I see the energy transition is sort of an entry point for us at CEW. The energy transition in India and most other countries is actually made up of three sub-transitions. The first is a power sector sub-transition. And in a nutshell, what it is it's a shift towards renewables, solar and wind, let's say, and a calibrated shift away from thermal, keeping in mind, of course, the energy security needs of India. Now, in the first session, we actually heard a lot about solar, so that really is the bedrock, as it were, of the power sector transition. The second sub-transition within the energy transition is the mobility sub-transition. And that is nothing but a shift from ICE, internal combustion engine powered vehicles, to at this stage, EVs and hybrids. And the third sub-transition, the way I see it, is the industrial sub-transition, which is a shift from industry moving from fossil-fueled sources of heat and power to clean sources such as green hydrogen. And that's where today's session comes in. And why these three sub-transitions are important is because if you add up the emissions of the underlying sectors, they add up to about 70% of India's emissions. So the power sector is 40%. Mobility, road transportation is about 10%. And industry is steel, cement, fertilizer, et cetera, is about 20%. 40, 20, 10, that's 70% of India's emissions. So if India wants to achieve or get to net zero by 2070, decarbonizing these three underlying sectors will be key. Another way of placing these three sub-transitions is sort of viewing or sort of figuring out where they are in their relative pace of evolution, or where they are in terms of having evolved. The power sector sub-transition, to my mind, is of course the most evolved of the three. National Solar Mission launched, I think, a little bit over 10 years ago. Wind energy precedes that in India for many, many decades. So that's the one which is the most advanced of the three. The mobility sub-transition, I think, is the one which is next. We're seeing a lot of activity with electric mobility in India. Last year, we recorded something to the tune of 1 million. We actually crossed 1 million EV sales in the 12 months from Jan to December. A lot of that electric mobility volume is being driven in the two-wheeler segment. The December sales for two-wheelers were something like more than 2x of what they were in January. That's the second sort of segment. Now, but remember, mobility is actually not as emissions intensive at an aggregate level as industry is. The industrial decarbonization is 3, and that really is, I think, the big elephant in the room, because 20% is a big chunk of GHG emissions. And green hydrogen holds a lot of promise to decarbonize a lot of the sectors that emit today. So with those sort of opening remarks, let me just begin by asking Mr. Jindal here, who's sitting right to my left. So getting green hydrogen production capability up and running is a first step, right? I mean, unless we have this production capacity up and running, and then if we want to sort of back in the supply chain, it's not just getting green hydrogen production capacity up, you need to be able to manufacture electrolyzers. So unless we actually do that at scale, we're actually not even off the ground. So maybe you could give us a little bit of a sense in terms of when we in India can expect to see large-scale green hydrogen production capacity up and running, as well as how soon we can expect to see electrolyzer manufacturing capability at scale up and running. Because there was a lot of talk in the previous segment on localization. I think we're, with the green hydrogen revolution today, at a stage we can think about localization at the outset. So over to you, Mr. Jindal.
No, thanks, Gagan. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Blue Circle, for inviting me to this session. I think you articulated pretty well on the topics, and green hydrogen is going to play a crucial role in decarbonization. The way we look into green hydrogen has unique advantage. It can be used as a fuel, as a feedstock, and in multiple applications, right? Unlike energy, so where we have some limitations. And the way I look into the electrolyzers are going to be one very critical piece of supply chain ecosystem to make this happen. If we look into today, we have some of the manufacturer already talking about, including L&T, to get into this space. I think the one thing which we need to understand and appreciate, India, unlike the renewable industry where we followed the world, we are trying to match the pace with the world. So whatever we are talking in green hydrogen today in India, everyone is talking same language, or at the same pace everywhere else. However, if you look into the solar and wind, the technology have matured, and we just simply adopted those technologies. We more of an importer to start with, and simply start following the world. In case of electrolyzer, the good part is we are already working on the manufacturing. There are a couple of companies that already declared mega plants, and the capacity should be up and running in next 2 to 3 years, which should meet the requirement. But if you look into the larger picture, the electrolyzer is just one piece in the green hydrogen supply chain. So we need to see how the renewable is also going to support this thing. Renewable energy, if we look into the standalone, solar has roughly 25% CUF plus minus. Wind again can vary from 35 to 40%. So that is not sufficient to produce green hydrogen at scale. If we look into the green hydrogen uses, the first industries which will going to adopt is refineries, fertilizers, and city gas. I believe we have Raman who will speak more on that part. And we are definitely talking about steel. We are talking about mobility sector. I think that is still going to take time because of the technology issues, and again the way the things are moving in this space. Now, the transportation of hydrogen is also a big challenge. So if we need to look into, it gives the idea that we need to put this hydrogen plants near to the consumer location. So if we look from the ecosystem, the renewable energy should go to higher PLFs, maybe 80-90% from the current standalone 25-30% to hybrid of 60%. Now that means we need to even focus on the storage solutions. It can be pumped hydro, it can be battery energy storage. So the complete ecosystem need to be developed along with the electrolyzers to make green hydrogen successful and competitive. So I think so the electrolyzer part, India is in a pretty good position. We are talking about 4,500 crore PLI being allocated. I think the government is going to come up with the detailed plan. I think it is going to give a big boost to the manufacturing industry. The way I think things are moving, by 2025-26, we should have been one of the big suppliers of electrolyzers to meet the domestic demand, as well as we should be able to cater some of the international demand.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Jindal. So I think you actually laid out in very nice detail that the ecosystem is much beyond or much bigger than just electrolyzer manufacturing. or manufacturing of capability, manufacturing of or production capability for green hydrogen. I mean, there's renewable energy at one end, there's manufacturing, there's transport, and then there's a consumer, right? And I think there's a sense that, a consensus, I would say, not just a sense, that there's a certain phased approach by which green hydrogen will sort of make its way into our ecosystem. Certain industries where it'll come in first. There are certain sort of ways in which it'll come in first, such as perhaps blending. Export markets also talked about as being some of the first commercial sale opportunities for green hydrogen that is made and that's produced out of India. But sort of moving to you, Mr. Maheshwari, you know, within this broad ecosystem, you know, can you, so, you know, you have the renewable energy developers or producers, you got the manufacturers, you got transport, you got the consumers. Can you sort of give us a little bit of deeper dive detail into how any of these or all of them are actually approaching this opportunity? Is it sitting by the wayside, sitting by the sideline, sort of waiting for people to make a move and see how it's going to evolve? Is you see money coming into the segment already, commitments being made? So, you know, over to you to give us a little bit more granular detail and flavor on that aspect.
So, you know, taking from what Vimal says, let's expand what is the hydrogen economy ecosystem. So I would divide it in three like any other segment. So possibly the upstream is where you have the renewable, which is feeding to the electrolyzers and generating the green hydrogen. So that's the upstream part of it. On the midstream, you have storage and transportation, which is one of the biggest problem areas as of now, given we also have 6 million tons of hydrogen market present in the country right now, which is approximately 8 to 10% of the global market. And then there is downstream side, which is even possibly could be even more challenging from perspective that if we have to use this hydrogen as fuel or feedstock, what all changes in the existing industrial setup needs to be done. So from that perspective, if an steel industry needs to go green, then what kind of furnaces, or can they change the existing furnaces? If an natural gas pipeline needs to be used for blending, to what extent it can be done? So all those downstream application would also have to look at when they want to use hydrogen as a molecule. So that's the whole ecosystem. Now talking of, you know, how players can approach it and what possibly can be done from an India perspective. So, you know, let me just say what Bimal said. We are almost, this is probably for the first time in an energy sector, we are almost on par with any country in the world. So, you know, from how we take it on from here is, of course, up to us as a country and, you know, corporate and government. But no other country has done substantially different or at any scale which is very, very different from here. Almost every country is where we are. So everybody is trying to frame JVs, signing MOUs, doing pilots, seeing which technology works, seeing what is more scalable, so all of that. So having said that, somebody who is looking at the whole ecosystem in a holistic way would definitely be key players in the industry. So somebody who is not just looking at manufacturing of electrolyzer or hydrogen production, but also figuring out solutions as to what can be done for storage and transportation, because that remains a challenging area. Whether I should convert from gas to liquid, whether I should store it in cylinder, whether pipeline transportation is more economical, and to what distance. So all of those questions needs to be answered and as we progress. And then all the industry players from the downstream also. So players who would look the whole holistic value chain would definitely possibly be the winners in the whole segment. But nevertheless, there is a room available in the supply chain for everyone else also. So, you know, take an example, if there is a hydrogen fueling station and it requires compressed hydrogen. Now hydrogen, because of its energy density, needs to be compressed much more compared to any other gas. So can we compress it within this 350 to 700 bar and what kind of compressors are required. So most of these high pressure compression systems are then manufactured outside India. Even I'm just giving an example from an high pressure compression, saying that in the whole value chain there will be something in it for everyone, and then there is people who would be then looking at the whole value chain in a holistic way, and that's how the hydrogen economy can be developed.
Oh, super, thanks for that. So just a quick follow-up. You touched upon a lot of the challenges. Just to give our audience a little bit of a sense, if you were to compare the challenges from a technical perspective, green hydrogen let's say renewables. I know renewables is part of that value chain. If you want to produce green hydrogen, it feeds into, or it's the source of power. But purely from a project or development perspective, how much more complex? Can you give us some sort of sense?
So, while as in country, we definitely have this benefit that we understand renewable much more than many other countries in the world. So from a perspective of what was discussed as challenges in the previous session, so, possibly from availability of land, skilled manpower, technology, finance, scale, all of those exist in India. So that naturally points at a much higher position compared to other countries. Having said that, the overall cost of production, renewables would play a key role, given that it will be approximately 50 to 70% of the cost of production is the renewable power. Now, how do you bring down it's not a matter of how do you bring down the intermittent power. You certainly would like to see how I can bring down the more dispatchable power or more 24/7 round the clock kind of an renewable which is available for the electrolyzer at a cheaper tariffs. So that would definitely play a key role. And in that, we all discussed in the previous session the importance of storage. So I don't want to touch on again for that. But apart from just the renewable, I would say, there are few more things which can be looked at it from perspective of how important it is to, bring down the overall cost, etc., which would then be possibly all electrolyzer related things like electrolyzer capex, the lifetime of electrolyzer, efficiencies of electrolyzer, and possibly usage of material which are some of those rare earth materials. How can we avoid that? So this is one part of it, and definitely the next section of that would be on the financing, because
right.
How do you bring down the weighted average cost of capital to do these projects? All of that would then play a
I'll get to that in the next question, but thank you for that. Now, Mr. Winter, both Mr. Jindal and Mr. Maheshwari talked about India being not so very far off where the rest of the world is when it comes to the development of green hydrogen production capability. Now, where you work, I think, have the benefit of a worldview beyond India as well, although your work is focused on India right now, but your worldview is beyond India. Can you just give us an idea, both in terms of where some of the other countries are specifically, let's say countries in Europe, Germany, where they are in terms of their journeys for green hydrogen, and what moves some of these countries may be making to actually, which could actually benefit green hydrogen producers out of countries like India. So where they are developing their own ecosystems and what they might be doing that could benefit Indian producers.
Yeah, thank you very much. Are you able to hear me? Namaskar and very good morning or good afternoon already. Thank you very much, first of all, to Blue Circle for inviting me. Yes, indeed, I come from Germany, but living here for more than 6-7 years already. And yes, I'm traveling a lot with Indians, also to Europe, to see what's happening there on the ground, what is happening in the ports mainly. First of all, let me maybe congratulate you, as Mr. Kapil said. You hear me now? Do you hear me now? Yeah, wonderful. So namaskar again. Namaskar again. So first of all, let me congratulate you. As Mr. Kapil said, 6 million tons, plus 2 million tons import actually, indirectly through ammonia and fertilizers, makes you 8 million tons per year of green hydrogen consumption in India. And that makes you the third largest producer and consumer of gray hydrogen in the world. So you are already an elephant in the room, and if you ask me how Europe sees India, Europe sees India as an elephant. They're saying if India is already the third largest producer and consumer in the world of gray hydrogen, most probably this country will also play a big role in green hydrogen, right? And then your first question about, oh, madam, namaste. Thank you for joining. Then the next question was in terms of how far India may be compared to Europe. Let me also congratulate you again. India was one of the largest green hydrogen producers in the world. But which year that was? 1962. It was, I think, 149 megawatt in Nangal, alkaline, powered by hydro. 149 megawatt. Do you know where we stand in terms of megawatt capacity green hydrogen production now in India? Any idea?
Almost zero.
It's less than, it's a
Less
single
than
digit.
where we were,
Single digit, yeah.
Maybe 1-2 megawatt,
Yeah,
no?
single digit, yeah.
So congratulations, you had been at 149, but then electricity was thought to be a little bit too expensive and precious for producing hydrogen out of it, so it was switched to natural gas. No. So now we are talking about going back to where India were already 40 years ago. No? So the technology is not that much rocket science. No? If we talk about alkaline, I mean, that technology is well known. The question is, no, can we advance to technologies, maybe even beyond alkaline and PEM, to further bring down the cost, no? So there you talk about technology readiness levels, no? And then, I mean, most of you may know the IEA reports and so on, where they track the technology readiness levels, no? And then there's the big bets, no? Will AEM come, will SOAC come, and all these kind of things, no? And there, yes, everyone is believing that maybe India can play a critical role in terms of diversifying supply chains, no? I mean, not everyone in Europe wants to depend on imports from only one country. And Germany does very well know that even in a renewable-based economy in Europe, we are not blessed with the Indian sun. We are not blessed with the Indian wind. So there is no doubt in government of Germany, but also in Europe, that around 90% of our hydrogen demand in form of ammonia or whatever will be imports. No? So you're asking me, where is EU, where is Germany? Germany, EU wants to decarbonize by 2050. So if they want to be net zero in steel, and the steel plant is an investment of 30, 40 years, they're investing now in the green steel. Yeah. Germany wants to decarbonize by 2045. So they're investing now. Yeah. But even with all the investment done being in Europe itself, there's no doubt that we need to take advantage of better sunshine and better wind, which you are blessed with, no? So the question is how much of the domestic market you would like to switch towards green and overcome challenges in terms of cost and maybe, starting manufacturing in India of electrolyzers itself, not only for India but also for the world. And another thing is how much do you actually also believe you would like to export and earn with the new oil of the future, no?
No, right, and on that export question, just to follow up, we were talking in the corridor about this new tender you were telling me about that Germany has floated for the import of green hydrogen. Could you just give the audience a little bit of a flavor on what this is and how important it is?
So that, as I just said, no, Europe knows that it will also need imports from outside Europe. So when COVID came, all these governments in the world, they came up with COVID relief funds and investment funds in how to actually boost the economy. And when the topic green hydrogen came up, German government said, okay, if we already know that we will remain a net importer, then let's don't only focus to bring down the cost of green hydrogen in Europe or in Germany, let's try to make this a world thing. Let's try to bring down the cost of green hydrogen on global scale. And why don't we dedicate some billions to scale up the green hydrogen market abroad from Europe? So what they came up from, apart from many other instruments, is the H2 Global Foundation and the HINCO tender. And government of Germany said, okay, let's make a tender which says no one from the EU is allowed to participate. I still don't understand how they could do this with the European industry, but it's really excluding European industry, yeah, saying, okay, we want only green hydrogen, green ammonia, green methanol from outside Europe, and we are willing to fund this with first 900 million euro, and now they're extending it by another 3.5 billion for contracts of difference. No? So there's a tender, we are waiting for the results at any time. The deadline had been extended, but the results will be there at any time. And yeah, it's a first largest, I would say, green hydrogen, green ammonia, methanol SAF tender in the world. Contracts of difference, no? Where in Germany the industry is being asked, how much do you want to pay for green hydrogen? No? There is no green hydrogen economy so far. No? You said it, like we're all in the beginning globally. So German industry may say, okay, now with the gas prices for the next 10 years, I'll be willing to pay maybe $2.50 or $2 per kg of green hydrogen. Then the tender is being floated. India is maybe offering at 4, 5, whatever, no, per kg of green hydrogen. And then German taxpayer is paying the difference with this 900 million and then 3.5 billion, no, for contracts, I think 10 years, no. So that's the idea. And I think everyone is very much excited. The question is, will Australia be more competitive than India? Will Morocco be more competitive than India? Will the US now be more competitive than India? Or will India win maybe some of those tenders? So I'm sitting here in India with you, hoping that India will win these kind of tenders and pretty much looking forward, no? But sorry, maybe I'm taking too long, but just to make clear that this is just the beginning, no? I mean, it's one tender, it's contracts of difference, so if so much money goes into paying the difference between $2 and $5, then the money is gone very fast, no? So that would maybe finance 2, 3 larger projects. The question is, what's beyond? And there, I think we all in India had to learn, no, that it's not about green hydrogen, it's more about green ammonia. And then we had to learn about, no, what kind of offtake we're actually talking. Will we have domestic offtake or not? Then the whole discussion went into international exports. Now we are talking about actually other things, like what can we actually do with the green hydrogen in India and then export those kind of products, no? And then the whole discussion on green iron actually comes up, no? So that's a big thing. Or, for example, most here in India have not considered that actually the EU is coming up with the RE fuel regulation. So from 2023 onwards, that's today, yeah, it's by the end of the year, it may be postponed. The EU is putting a new rule. What's this new rule? I'll finish with this. The EU is coming up with the rule that all ships bigger than 5,000 tons entering the EU or leaving the EU have to reduce their emissions from fuels gradually, not 0 to 100% in one. And the companies like Maersk and so on, they can do that fleet-wise. So they can say, okay, only one ship has to fuel green, and that will account for the entire fleet. So now the question comes up for these international shipping companies, where do I want to refuel? Do I refuel in India? Do I refuel in Australia? Where do I refuel? And if India is able to give the fuel cheap, you don't need to transport the fuel to Europe. You fuel Europe by fueling its ships. Same with airplanes. And I promise this regulation is on the table. And if it's not coming in 23, then it will come in 24. And if it's not coming in 24, then it's coming in 25. But investment in green ammonia has to happen now to have it in 4 years. No? So exciting times for India. And yeah, I'm actually very delighted to be able to form part of these exciting times here in India with you. Thank you.
Super. I think what's clear is that, again, the default is to compare green hydrogen with renewables. But what's clear is there's a lot more opportunities with green hydrogen, a lot more innovative opportunities. And it's a mix of what one can do with the green hydrogen that we produce in overseas markets. It's a mix of what we can do with that green hydrogen in domestic markets. And both sort of feed off, I think, of some sort of policy support incentive. And all of us here would be well aware that the National Green Hydrogen Mission was approved by the Cabinet in early January. And of course, it featured in the budget speech as well. Some of the headline numbers or figures in that Green Hydrogen Mission document are that the government expects or targets a production capacity production capability rather, of 5 million metric tons per annum by 2030. The government itself estimates that it would require investments to the tune of 8 lakh crores or $100 billion to achieve it. And it's got an outlay in this budget anyway of about 19,000 crores. But remember, the mission document also specifically says that the government sees its role as a catalyzer of capital. So what it wants to do is create the right conditions, seed the right type of projects, seed the right type of opportunities to get that $100 billion to be crowded in to actually develop that production capability. And with that sort of background and shifting a little bit away from what Mr. Winter was talking about internationally, I'd like to ask Mr. Chadda. So, if we were to look at the domestic market, and we've had other speakers talk about steel, talk about fertilizers, talk about blending, but can you deep dive into how you see the use case of green hydrogen evolving domestically? What's going to happen first? What's going to take a bit longer? And also give us a sense on the blending side as well, because I think that would be very useful. How soon do you see blending happening? Are there any technical limits that really prevent blending to go beyond a certain threshold? Over to you, sir.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Gagan. I think what we are referring to is hydrogen blending with natural gas. And possibly we foresee a sort of a short-term or a medium-term plan to move towards the 100% hydrogen economy. Well, globally, I think Mr. Winter will basically correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we don't find any global standards as far as the blending of hydrogen with natural gas in the steel pipeline is concerned. And there are few things what in possibly Netherlands, they're blending 0.1 to 2.2% hydrogen in short pipelines. And similarly, there UK also has trying to blend around 0.1%, that too for the short terms. Well, in India, rather, we have sort of two pilot projects which are basically working for blending of hydrogen with the natural gas. The one is that we are blending as a pilot project about 2% hydrogen in our natural gas pipeline in one section, and where the end consumer is basically the city gas distribution. So that pilot project basically is supplying gas is blended at 2% volume to almost 50,000 houses, around 40 odd CNG stations, and around 250 industrial and commercial customers. And basically that's a sort of a pilot study, and we are basically observing two things basically. What is the impact on the pipeline of blending that 2%, and what is the end user feedback? So I must say, whatever time which has been passed, the reports, there is absolutely no adverse report as if from the end user, as well as the thickness measurements in the pipeline and metallurgy is concerned. Second pilot project is basically with regard to domestic PNG connections, which is in this near Hazira, which is being done by in a power plant colony. So that is also there, and there possibly the percentage is bit higher, around it is around 5%, but they are all domestic customers. So coming down to this is what we are basically trying to work upon, and possibly with the with almost 20,000 kilometers of pipeline transporting close to 180 million standard cubic meter gas, this presents a wide opportunity for blending of hydrogen and transporting it along with the natural gas. You said about the technical limits. I think again there will be only two parts. One is what is the metallurgy, how the steel pipelines are basically behaving with the hydrogen blending, and second is the end user concerns. So typically what we are basically studying is that this is a part of a very 2-year study which is currently going on. What we have observed is that the low grade CS pipelines with higher thickness, they are more amenable to hydrogen, whereas what we use is API X52, API 5L, X52. They are comparatively lesser amenable to hydrogen, but nonetheless, I mean, there's a pilot study which has been done with the help of our consultants, Engineers India Limited, and they are possibly hinting towards blending up to 3% without any adverse effect on our natural gas pipeline. So here we see in that. Second, I think the technical limit will be basically the storage of CNG in high pressure gas cylinders for that mobility application, transportation. There, I think the code for the type 1 steel cylinders specify maximum hydrogen blend of 2%. So that is also one of the technical limits what we are taking. So more or less what we are basically going forward is that it's a sort of a short-term R&D and pilot project, and as till today we don't have any adverse effects, but we will gradually ramp up the blending, which may be in percentage wise also and in the reach type also. So possibly we have a target to reach close to above 2%, maybe 3% or maybe 5% in the long run.
Right, right. And with such low sort of modest penetration, that higher cost of green hydrogen also eventually may not really hurt so much, you know. Would that be a fair statement to make?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we are talking of a pilot study, the cost of hydrogen when it is blended with natural gas, the weighted cost of hydrogen, when we are talking of 2% or 3%, possibly it doesn't impact too that. But yes, when we talk of maybe 180 million MMSCMD of gas, and even 2% will be a huge amount.
Right.
So of course that cost of the hydrogen has to be bit comparable to the cost of natural gas what we are having, and that is what we look forward for that.
Right, right. So on a percentage basis, not so much to hurt, but that percentage is of a huge base, so it can actually catalyze, catalyze development of significant capacities, so absorb production from significant capacities.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. Since it is a pilot project, the costing what Mr. Bimal and Kapil were referring, they were basically is not of much. Our focus is to just make a study or conclude rather what is how much we can go in that percentage.
Yep.
I think there's a study by I think Terry and all that. The transportation of hydrogen molecule is much cheaper than transmission of electricity. So that becomes a sort of a thing. So I foresee that yes, if we are able to reach anywhere between 3% or 5% blending, that will provide a good opportunity for the hydrogen producers to transport their energy.
Right, right. Thank you, sir. So, moving to Ms. Dhawan, I'm going to kind of put you slightly on the spot here and ask you to perhaps reflect on the National Green Hydrogen Mission document, specifically on one aspect that caught my eye, was of course the ambition is there, but it also sort of naturally places the MNRE at the center as the custodian, you could say, of the evolution of of green hydrogen in India. But it also specifically envisages roles for a host of other ministries. So, I'm just reading off here because there's no way I can remember this. Specifically mentions Ministry of Power, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Ministry of Chemicals and Fertilizers, Ministry of Steel, Ministry of Road Transport, Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways, Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of External Affairs. So can you just give us a sense, give the audience a sense, what makes green hydrogen so special that it's going to require coordination or input from this really big set of ministries?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. And in fact, I have heard very little of the discussion. And really speaking, you have answers to why it has to be interministerial. Now, when we talk of hydrogen, or rather for that matter, anything, renewable energy or energy transition, it cannot be restricted to one ministry alone. It cannot be just Ministry of Power. It cannot be it's renewable, so it should be MNRE. And in the recent past, if we look at the way government is taking steps to meet its mission of popularizing renewables, or 50% coming from renewables by 2030 and net zero, it is that they are taking into account how we can achieve it, like the recent energy conservation bill. So it definitely talks about that how renewables should be integrated in buildings beyond a certain size. You are talking of energy efficient buildings, use of renewables and so on. So therefore somewhere you are bringing the states with you, you are bringing energy producers with you, you are taking into consideration certification of buildings and so on. Now coming to the question, and that is to deal largely with hydrogen. And again, in the budget, so much of money has been kept, so that ensures that Ministry of Finance, because ultimately money is to be provided by that ministry, they have to keep the provision. You talk about blending, so naturally you need to have natural gas ministry with you, Ministry of Power with you, and fertilizers, ammonia, and so on. So everyone has to work together and understand. Mr. Winter mentioned about the point, and that was regarding the green shipping. Yeah. And I'll also like to put here that TERI has also established National Center for Green Ports and Shipping. So over there, we are not looking at one fuel. It's everything. What is best for what kind of ship, what kind of region, what kind of port, and so on. And we have to see things in totality. And you very rightly mentioned, because there are going to be ships from around the world, and they all have their own standards. So do we need to have some standards which we all abide to at international level? Should we put some sort of green tax? If someone is unable to do it, it's going to remain in your water for so long. So therefore, practically in years to come, with energy transition, we all have to be as clean as possible. And definitely you need one ministry which will be overall responsible, but they have to work together with everyone else. And I'll say there are few which are missing, because when you talk of hydrogen, safety is a big concern. You have to look into storage tanks. You also have to look into perhaps Ministry of for skilling, because it is a new technology. And rightly mentioned, not that new, because 40 years back we were producing it. It is still expensive, and therefore commercialization may take place, but government is trying to push it as much as possible. It's also like storage of hydrogen, and you must have read in the newspaper, the tanks catching fire in United States. So therefore, safety is a big concern. So we have to train our manpower in that. It is not just production, it's the entire storage, transportation, dispensing. You need manpower skilled in all these areas as well. So therefore, if we want to succeed, we all will have to work together.
Understood very well. I mean, because very well put, because, you know, when we think of the scale of opportunities, you pointed shipping, I think the average person who thinks of green hydrogen, it would not occur to them that shipping
Yeah,
is a big opportunity. And you know, it's a way to export in a way.
absolutely.
You know, the blending petroleum, natural gas, you know, Ministry of Fertilizer, a big end use of hydrogen consumption or production today is hydrogen, right? Steel again. So that sort of explains the complexity, I would say, of the green hydrogen opportunity, the layers of the green hydrogen opportunity.
And also, I'd like to mention another point is that you very rightly mentioned about steel. And in India, we are in a unique situation. Like, first of all, our energy load is yet to be peaked. So we have to consume much more. As a developing country, if we look at how the industries are going to grow and per capita consumption of energy, so both are going to grow at very fast rate. And therefore, to make a commitment to go net zero is a very bold step. And we also have to see, when you talk of infrastructure yet to be built, steel is an important component, cement is an important component, and over there, you cannot meet production by solar and other renewable energies. So you have no alternative, if you really want to achieve your target, to look for hydrogen, which is one of the potential candidates.
Right, right. Well, thank you for that. So I'm also mindful of the time. I would like to ask one round of quick follow-up questions to each of you, but request if you can keep your intervention slightly brief. I'll start with you, Mr. Jindal. So, you know, when I think of renewable, again, renewables is the benchmark to compare. The way or the model that it evolved in India was large-scale projects developed by IPPs selling to a third-party customer, the utility or the DISCOM, either directly or via SECI or NVVN. We had CleanMax on the panel before, but, you know, corporate uptake of renewables has sort of followed the large-scale deployment of capacities. What kind of business models are emerging when it comes to green hydrogen in India? Is it third-party producers looking to produce green hydrogen and selling it to somebody, or are end users such as, you know, steel refineries, are they looking to set up their own capacities in-house? You know, and what does that really mean for the opportunity?
Yeah, so Gagan, I will say it's going to be a hybrid model. The way we are looking, like I said, you know, Kapil also, we have 6 million of hydrogen requirement, and we look into the major requirement is coming from refineries and fertilizers. So refineries are more, except Reliance, you know, I will say majority driven by the PSUs. But if you look into the fertilizer market, there are many private players. So, and even I will say some of the smaller industries are also using hydrogen, which is much more expensive compared to what we are discussing today, right? And those guys are also looking green hydrogen as one of the viable options. So I think it's going to be a mixture of smaller industries who are using hydrogen or natural gas. They will try to take benefit of green hydrogen. Definitely cost is one of the challenges, like Madam has also said. Tobias also said we have an opportunity. So that is one part on the domestic market. The second, which we can see, you know, major boost, which can give us economies of scale, is export market. I think
Which didn't exist for renewables, right? I mean,
which did not
it's a
exist
whole
because you cannot, you know, produce in India and transport the power. Although HVDC lines and other stuff, you know, people are talking,
Right.
but it's still not implemented. Unlike renewable power, ammonia is one of the established, you know, carrier for hydrogen. It can be used directly. It can be used again as a carrier. I'm not talking about LOHCs, but if you see, out of roughly 180 million tons of ammonia, which is, you know, consumed worldwide, roughly 20 million is traded. So there's a 10% which is already being done. It's established commodity, and I believe, you know, this market is also going to evolve. Europe definitely is looking, there are a couple of other Asian countries are also looking to import because they don't have the infrastructure to produce hydrogen plus derivatives in their country. So I think we as a country are going to see a hybrid of domestic demand coming from PSUs and private HPAs, and then focusing on export market.
Super. So hybrid model coming from varied sets of sources, but all of these sources are going to require capital to build the capacity, right? I mean, you need capital to build the capacity. The Green Hydrogen Mission document, as I mentioned earlier, itself says something to the tune of $100 billion by 2030 is what they estimate will be required to be invested. $100 billion is a lot of money. Just to give you a sense or an idea, the exposure of the entire Indian scheduled commercial banking system to the entire power sector, so thermal, renewables, everything, transmission, distribution, is something to the tune of $80 billion today. Of course, that doesn't include the two large NBFC behemoths, PFC, REC. Those combined are again about $100 billion. You add up the smaller sort of players, that's about $200 billion. So that's entire exposure today. Green hydrogen going to require $100 billion for that. So Mr. Maheshwari, I'm going to turn this over to you. Financing for renewables has matured. Coincidentally, real capacity growth for renewables also coincided with a very low interest rate environment, And remember, whether it's renewables, whether it's green hydrogen, it's all infrastructure. And infrastructure at the end of the day tends to be majority debt finance. We could quibble about what is it, 60, 70, 80% or whatever, but a bulk of the capital comes from lenders. So what does it really mean, India embarking on its green hydrogen journey at a time when interest rates are on a significant upswing? What does it mean for financing? And what do you think how are lenders viewing this opportunity?
Because you gave an example of renewable and the low cost debt there, and at the time when renewable was growing, the interest rates were quite attractive compared to what it is right now. Lenders would definitely look at a couple of things. First, they would look at the developer and the offtake, who is the offtaker. So that's quite important for them. The second, they would definitely look if possibly there is a long-term offtake. So why this whole renewable model was very successful, because SECI was a party which was considered more creditworthy and which was ready to sign a long-term agreement. And they know that this would be my cash flows going forward at a predetermined tariff. There was a must-run status given to the renewable. So if all those elements from a risk perspective can be covered, given there is so much of funding available even in this environment, financing will not be a challenge. So what, apart from just these aspects, they would definitely look is the technology mature?
Yeah.
So technology is mature, so nothing what we are talking is something which we have just arrived at. Electrolyzers were in existence for decades. Production of hydrogen through electrolysis process have been there. Renewable energy production have been there. I think what's missing is the scale.
Right.
So at what scale you do. So possibly lenders will find in comfort from a perspective that if there are credible parties who have already done some pilots by more equity exposure than debt, and these projects are successful and have a long-term offtake agreement, I think funding should not be a challenge, both from domestic financing institutions as well as ECBs, because there is good amount of money chasing green projects. So from an infra perspective, when you say what is pending in infra is renewables, roads, ports, and all green technologies. If you cannot fund these, what will you do with all this money which is chasing? There are new funds which are just coming from a theme of ESG or decarbonization. So having said that, they will definitely look for bankable projects, and what would be the definition of a bankable project would define how attractive financing can be arranged So, possibly some larger players with good offtake arrangements would be able to get it at some better terms compared to some small industries, but over a period of time, I think the cost of capital should reduce.
Right, right. And picking up on a couple of points that the panelists themselves made earlier, remember there was mention of more than 50% of the cost of landed cost of green hydrogen being renewable energy. And renewable energy anyway, as we know, is being financed today at very low rates, very fine rates. So a lot of that is already taken care of. Second is, if exports are going to be one of the first movers, then that creates the opportunity to borrow in, let's say, yen, if you're exporting to Japan, at very, very low rates, because you've created a natural hedge. Imagine if you have a long-term PPA with a Japanese buyer for whatever, 5, 10 years, whatever quantity. There's no need to hedge. You can borrow in low-cost yen and really make, the word that phrase that Mr. Winter talks about, make India's sun and wind work for you, and improve the economics of the project. So that's, I think, thank you. Thanks for that heartening, view on financing. And moving to you, Mr. Winter, one of the things that I, again, think of is that, do you see green hydrogen emerging as a force for international cooperation in an age where, countries are looking increasingly inwards? Is this going to be something, you talked about shipping, you talked about Germany opening a tender, was very interesting to anybody but a EU country. So do you see this as being a counterforce to what's happening globally around us?
The answer is yes. I mean, just look at, you can, I even look it up maybe at the website of MEA, how many MOUs and green hydrogen agreements government of India already made with so many different countries in the world, no? And yes, for example, the Indo-German Energy Forum, we are implementing and supporting the Indo-German Green Hydrogen Task Force with big players from government, but also from research involved. So I can definitely say yes. But let me come back to the question of the business model. So from our perspective, it's almost all is about offtake, no? So who's willing to pay a premium of, okay, now gas prices are high, but let's assume within the next 4 or 5 years they may go down maybe a little bit. Then we are talking about a premium of like factor 4, no? So it's like 75%. Who in India wants to pay 75% more for green than for gray? Who? Tell me. Everyone would be happy to know. Who's willing to pay 4 times more? So then we are saying, okay, in 2030 it will be not 4 times more, in 2030 it will be only 2 times more. Okay, tell me, who is willing to pay double the price? No? So that's the question. So then we are coming to the next thing, who is going to be the offtake? If it's not national, it's not happening right now with the blending quotas, the mandates, no? Then maybe international. And there then the answer is yes, it's a mixed model. And there a lot comes to the topic of certification, madam. I'm really happy that you mentioned it, because the question is, what is green, right? So EU is defining what's green, and if India wants to export to EU, the certification has to be in place to make it green. But now here the trick comes. What makes the green hydrogen so expensive is not the renewables we know will go down. It's still the capex, no, these other 50% of the investment. And how do you get the capex down? You get the capex down by either advancements in technology or scale, as Mr. Maheshwari said, or one factor also is the plant load factor. So is the electrolyzer running at 60, 70% with the sun and the wind, or is it maybe running 95% or more? That's very important. And there the topic of certification is super, super important. There's a big misunderstanding that the certification scheme in Europe, which is being put in place, only allows you to produce green hydrogen on the electrolyzer to be qualified to export to Europe, but you're not allowed, for example, to use the Indian power or yellow power or red power or whatever. You can you can have a mixed calculation. So that's very interesting. So you were asking about the certification schemes. The good thing is really an important message. On the same electrolyzer in India, you can even produce gray or black hydrogen, or black, not gray is from gas, but black from coal, if you want to, and use this, no? I'm not encouraging this because it's cheaper to use renewables, but what I want to say is, if you have the same electrolyzer, you produce, let's say, 30, 40, 50% premium with the certification for Europe, get the money from Europe. Japan has less requirements, get the rest to Japan. India also would like to have, at least right now for the next 4 or 5 years, the green hydrogen at par with gray hydrogen for ammonia production, get it for domestic use. No? So think of different off-takers internationally, but also nationally, and be aware that on the same electrolyzer, you can produce all kinds of colors of hydrogen, but time will show that the cheapest way to produce the hydrogen then at the end will be with green electricity from renewables. So yeah, looking forward to a lot of projects coming up here in India.
Right. No, thank you. And quickly again, shifting gears to Mr. Chadda. So, there was talk about upstream, midstream, downstream, sort of zeroing in on the transport aspect. Again, the power sector, we've seen private developers make significant inroads on the transmission side. It's considered one of the best performing areas for a private developer to get into. Minimal risk, That's why you've seen these folks be able to raise bonds in the domestic market. They were amongst the first to InvIT themselves. On the other hand, gas has largely been the PSU domain on the transportation side. Do you think this is something that's going to repeat with green hydrogen? Or do you think that the way we think of transporting green hydrogen is going to be very, very different from the way we think about transporting gas?
Well, it's true that because the gas pipeline infrastructure is basically quite capital intensive, and the market around the ecosystem has to grow gradually, so there is a long gestation period also before we can monetize the asset. This is basically the reason why it's there. But what we are basically doing with the trying to blend hydrogen with the natural gas is that we are basically trying to evaluate or trying to present a whole canvas of consumers that can be put on board. Like when we supply gas, we are supplying to fertilizer, we are supplying to steel, industry, power, small industries, commercial segments, mobility, domestic houses, all that. So basically when we are blending, basically the issue is that how do the hydrogen blending react to the end user and how it can be utilized. As I could understand your question, yes, it is true, like the levels what we have today, it is something like we look forward to a lot of incentives, maybe from the government for the hydrogen, because right now the cost of production of hydrogen is quite, there is a significant variation to the other alternate fuels or even with the natural gas. So right now we look forward to certain policy initiatives with incentives, but in the long run, like Mr. Winter was telling, that maybe by 2030 there will be or maybe beyond there, with the ramping of the hydrogen production capacity, the cost of electrolyzers will possibly go down.
Right.
So that's what we are looking forward to that.
Right. Thank you, sir. I'm mindful of the time, so I'm going to give Ms. Dhawan the last question before we turn it over to the audience for any quick questions. So, I talked about the National Solar Mission, which was launched a little bit over 10 years ago. And look how far we've come with solar. National Green Hydrogen Mission, approved by the cabinet, budgetary allocation made, 19,000 odd crores for it. What are the lessons, good, bad, things to do that one can pick up from the National Solar Mission? Are there any things that we can learn in terms of not to do in the way we've sort of we've evolved with our solar journey or renewables journey? So yeah, over to you, ma'am.
Yeah, first of all, the scenario 10 years back was very different from what it is today, because 10 years back we were talking about that we need to take action for climate change. But today we all have realized that the current pattern of energy generation and energy usage is something which we cannot afford. And therefore the pace at which we have to run, it's going to be much faster. The other thing which we have to, I should say, not just from National Solar Mission, but many others, is that we can't leave anyone behind. And that is what it becomes very important, that we indigenize the technology and we ensure that it is not restricted for usage to large industries. It is available to small and medium enterprises as well, and that is where it becomes important that we produce, we take SMEs with us, we also provide them clean
The
energy.
hybrid model that
Yeah.
Mr. Jin was talking about.
The other point which I would like to make here is that, and again comparing to a decade or two back, it was we were looking at the West for technology. Today, I'll put it this way, that India can perhaps develop technology, innovate technology, and reduce the cost. But we also have to be careful, because when I say run fast, but you have to evaluate. When we are talking of green hydrogen, let's look at how much of water is available, because ultimately you are going to produce it from water. The other point is, when you are talking of solarization or using renewable energy, how much land do you require? Where do we have both land and water available? So it should not become a sort of virtual flow of water in the form of energy to other countries. Not to say it has enormous potential. We have to reduce the cost. For India, it's a unique opportunity, because if we look at the number of days we have solar energy, perhaps we are best in the world, and therefore the cost of production of solar is going to be much or perhaps half of what we are producing at Europe. And if you use it for hydrogen production, you are going to be competitive in the global market. And our own energy demands are so large that export, yes, but even for your own growth, there is enormous potential. So therefore, evaluation of technology, LCA analysis, and look from the production to the end use, that is what is required. Let's not all concentrate on hydrogen production. Looking at export market, we also have to look into how we will be able to use it for our own growth.
Right.
Thank you.
So more of an equitable use of green hydrogen, as it were. I have a lot more questions, but I'm also mindful of the time, and I've been given a little bit of a note that says, let's wrap it up soon. But I also want to open it up to the audience for one or two really quick questions. I'm guessing there's a lot of questions, but yeah.
So hi, this is Rakesh Rathore from JSW Energy. To Winter, basically, just wanted to add upon the point you have mentioned between India and Australia, that who would take it up. I would want to add here that obviously the renewable energy, and it's an RTC, around the clock energy, which will be the key to basically crack the whole ecosystem. I just wanted to add upon three comparatives between India and Australia for this particular green hydrogen initiatives. So first is distance, obviously, that everyone will keep in mind for transportation. And second is development timelines. So the gestation period in Australia versus the gestation period in India, we have seen how the renewable projects come up in India very quickly versus the Australian market. And the third is dispatch of energy into the grid. So this is the one segment, the last one, which I think we have a huge advantage over any other market, because we are enjoying the largest electrical grid here, which balance itself and can absorb the variability of the renewables, which is the key issue. So I think with these segment, probably India I would say can be the leader of this particular initiative.
No, thank you. So validation of the
Just
big
be
bet,
let
but
quickly.
yes.
Two things. Congratulations. You are not only fortunate to have one of the best solar radiation levels in the world. There is other countries with better solar actually, no? But what India is able to do is to convert the solar energy into electricity at the lowest cost, which is very important. And the profile of solar in India is mainly base load, no? 365 days. Somewhere in India, the sun is always shining and you have one grid. And the second thing which international investors are always wondering about India is, yes, wind is a little bit more expensive than solar, but your wind is blowing at night and in the morning when the peak demand is there, and it's still so much cheaper than coal. Why on earth you are not investing more in wind in this country? Many people ask me this question, and I always say, I don't know.
I think
I
the
don't
answer,
know.
what I understand is the windy sites seem to be getting close to exhaustion. So that's why offshore wind and repurposing are things that are.
And second thing, let's see, no, you're saying Australia, I don't know. The tender which I had mentioned, this international tender, no? The results are going to be published in a couple of days if the deadline is not being extended. So let's say in a couple of days or weeks, we will hear what are the results of this international tender, and then we'll hopefully see successful bids from India.
A bit like, the first reverse auctions in a way, right, for renewable power. A lot of anticipation in terms of what the price discovery is going to be. So do you think it's going to surprise us on how low it is, or just if I would ask you to crystal ball gaze?
I'm pretty close also following that up with government of Germany,
Okay.
and really nobody knows, no? With
Right.
this gas price distortion, nobody knows right now who is willing actually to pay how much for that premium. And if green is not that far away right now from gray, there may be a lot more people wanting to pay for the green hydrogen a lot more than that had been anticipated before. So yeah, nobody knows. We are looking forward to the results.
I think one quick question, if possible, I'll ask somebody to hand the microphone.
Good afternoon. I am Piyush
And
Sharma
really
from.
quickly, please, if you could.
I am Piyush Sharma from Manikaram Power. I lead the strategic initiative for the company. So my question is to Mr. Winter. You have just said that about how to reduce the capex of the electrolyzer or the complete value chain of the green hydrogen, right? So as you know, there are only two mature technologies right now. One is alkaline and the PEM, right? Which are having the efficiency of maybe less than up to 70%, we can say. But, and maybe these are the bankable projects from the investor point of view. But as soon as we are moving to the higher efficiency electrolyzer, maybe 90% or 95%. So there are some technologies available which is not yet proven. So how to do the proper diligence, due diligence on the same if investor investing in those technologies which was not yet proven.
So is technology as big of a...
Actually, I think the L&T knows better
Yeah.
how to answer it, but yeah, my perception is the bankable projects, they are all either PEM or alkaline, and everything else is either on a smaller scale, no, or pilot. But yes, there's big bets on SOC, there's big bets on AEM technology,
I
no?
would love to get Mr.
No,
Jindal or Mr.
yeah,
Maheshwari.
so I think, I will just try to compare it with the renewable side. What has happened in solar? If you look into the solar, we used to have less than 100 watt peak panels. Now we're talking about 500 watt peak panels. The technology matured from, poly to mono PERC. Now we're talking bifacials, P-type, N-type. So you're going to see the similar curve in the electrolyzer space also. So while we're talking about, alkaline and PEM technologies, SOECs and AEMs are also going to happen. It will take time. It's like, same bifacial P-type and N-type, right, which we're seeing it now. While we're talking for like, even perovskite we are talking today, so there are a lot of things are going to happen. Yeah.
Battery chemistry.
Yeah, so it's going to happen, I think, but it does not mean that that superior technology yet to come, you don't start. You need to start somewhere. If you don't start, you will never end your journey. So I think there will be a kickstart of the project with Alkaline and PAM, and again the different technologies will see its space. Like SOEC, you cannot put it everywhere, even though it's a high efficiency. You need steam, right? So I think we will see a mixture of utilization of technologies in its space, depending upon multiple factors, not only commercials, even the site constraints, the timeline, execution, everything is going to come into picture.
I think with that, I can see the time's up sign flashing at us for quite some time. I think that's a hint enough for us to sort of wrap up this. But thank you very much to each of the panelists. Really, I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our panelists, will be happy to answer questions on the sidelines after this as well. So I'm going to give you open invitation to please speak to them and ask whatever you feel like asking them. But thank you very much. Thank you.